Beloved star, welcome. Welcome to Immortal Starlight Pod episode 36. I'm experimenting with something a little different with this one. If you're watching the pod on YouTube, you'll see that I've got my Yeti microphone, which is an old friend. When I first started doing Alvin Starlight sessions online on Skype, actually, I bought this microphone and I haven't used it for years. I've just dusted it, and also recording here in my room in Avalon. And this is, part of my world here. I've just landed home and I want to call this pod episode 36, the Nomad Soul. So landing home, what an interesting idea. It's a strange thing for me because I actually feel more at home in the lands that I've just been than I do here in the place that is technically my earth home at this time, here living in the town of Glastonbury in Avalon. And whenever I travel away in recent years, it's very challenging for me to come back. And whilst I know it's the place I'm meant to be for this time, it's in many ways not an environment that my soul recognizes or knows. And to speak a little bit more about that, because I think there are many starlight souls, many of us dwelling in circumstances or in places that feel so different to the vast spheres of our remembrance and of who we truly are. So for a start, I'd just love to say I've received some really beautiful messages about the fires in Yellowknife, for those who've heard about that, which is where I've just been. So I've just spent 3 weeks with my son who lives up in Yellowknife, taking my son who lives here with me in Avalon, and bringing our intercontinental family together for 3 weeks up there in the far north of Canada. So the wildfires were huge wildfires in the forests on the land there, were on their way towards us while I was there. And there were days when the skies were filled with smokes and days when they were clear again. And some days when there was ash falling around us. And it came and it went. So this was something we were aware of. And then the day after we flew out, the wildfires actually came so close that there was an evacuation order for Yellowknife. So my son and his father, along with all other 20,000 residents of Yellowknife, bar 1,000 essential workers, have been evacuated from Yellowknife. So this beautiful community and town that I was in up to about not even a week ago is now empty, and all of the firefighters and the military and coming from all around the country to help to keep the fires at bay. So obviously linked to themes of change and energy within the body of the earth and her atmospheres and her elemental balance and the patterns of movement that are taking place. And there is vast configuration and movement of energies, both created by imbalance, but also, as I sense it, also by her recreation at this hour, her own natural and powerful elemental recreation of her lines of light, her elemental lines and flows of force that are altering into their deep, white, immortal starlight, golden configuration for the dawn. So there's a lot of power, there's a lot of elemental intensity and energy of movement at this time upon the earth. And so the earth herself at this time is a nomad soul. She is migrating, she is changing template, she is altering. And so some of the change we are witnessing is the elemental power, the velocity of that alteration. And as the silver wheel speaks, I love the words, we are angels of that storm. We are designed for its winds. We know how to ride them. And I know that for my son and his father, and for ourselves, even as we sat with the skies glowing a deep orange and ash falling around us, that we were laughing and talking, relaxed, being with one another. And that often when things are unfolding in places, we can project a lot of negative emotion and fear and anxiety onto those occurrences and those happenings. And whilst there are, of course, aspects to what is unfolding that are profoundly challenging and alarming, to remember that very often the human response in the place of that is actually to be settled and deepened into our nomad soul, which is that sinuous, elemental part of our being that is supple, adapted to change, adapted to the alterations and the power of our environment, which humanity has been for aeons. And it's very recent that we have expressed in a way that means we feel we need to be safely in an environment of four walls, in an unchanging environment, one not threatened or in any way interactive or changed by the elemental world. And I believe in many ways our peace, our deepest peace and humanity, our power, our alignment, our love is actually switched on when we meet with the elemental intensity of Earth in all of her expressions, and that it awakens in some ways our deepest humanity, our immortal starlight, our love, that I am presence, that which we truly are. Sometimes it's actually easier to be ourselves in those circumstances than in the constructs of civilization that we have evolved in more recent times. So yeah, to remember that when we will, and as we are seeing increasingly, these incredibly powerful, elemental and intense events around the earth. And so too, there are energies of imbalance expressing, in those wildfires, also in the intensity of an environment that usually has more rain at this time, that has rarely in recent times experienced wildfires like this, that these are in some ways unprecedented happenings. They are changes that also correspond to the loss of balance in our relationship between ourselves and our environment. So, as the 10th teaching of the Silver Wheel says, to hold both things in mind, this great flowering of the dawn, the nomad soul of Earth that is in this migration into another great age of light, that is in a harmonic of expansion, of regeneration, of blossoming once more, that we also hold in mind, are able to be both wings, if you like, of our perception that also perceives the imbalance of the changes that are due to destructive and imbalanced behaviors, and that we don't let one awareness cancel out the other. It's easy perhaps to be in one or the other, one of those awarenesses or the other, surely, or we feel ourselves seeking or questing for which of them to land in. But the truth is that our angelic perception is composed of both wings of that seeing, of that sight, of that knowing. And the maturity of our hearts is embedded in a greater and a deeper perspective that is able to see both. And when I ask the land around Yellowknife, I've been very much in prayer and tuning in to the land there, the spirits of the land, the elemental powers of the skies, the energetic orbits and circuits of the earth, and asking the question, what needs to heal, what needs to come into balance? And the answer that came, this is to me, and feeling how that resonates, is that sense that humanity needs to chill out. All of this fired upness, our lives becoming very electrical. And with the rising frequencies of the dawn and our rising octave of vibration, and the old patterns, the old holding patterns being pressured to release, as it were, our nervous systems can become overstrained, overwired with all of that electrical energy. And that's the part that we don't need to feed into. That nomad soul being fitted to the winds of change doesn't mean being wired into that hypervigilant state, being overstimulated, always on the edge, ready for anything at any moment. It doesn't point to that state. The nomad soul, in fact, points to a state of something quite opposite, the total opposite, in fact. It's a very, very peaceful state, very balanced, grounded, aligned, a great sense of safety, of assurity, of security, of belonging to the whole earth, our nomad soul that belongs to the nomad interdimensional soul of earth, a meeting place of worlds. And while we experience change on so many levels, that we are able to chill out. I just chill, cool down those neural circuits, all of that electrical impulse. Don't let it get carried away, carry you away into a hyper-wired state where you're kind of on the edge of your seat all of the time. So as I've come back from this land, and my son and his father are safely on their way south with the rest of the Yellowknife population. And thank you so much for the beautiful wishes also that have come in, and the awareness around that happening, because yeah, my soul sings with that land, and I've been sharing from there. And I believe it's a great part of our awakening collective consciousness, the treasures held in the north. So much is held in the ice and the snows, in the land, the untouched wildernesses of the far north. So much of the pristine timelines of our deeper and greater remembrance, our planetary wisdom and intelligence, is held in the north and is yet to be uncovered. We are at the beginning of a great age of revelation that flows through from the northern lands. And my soul for lifetimes is linked to those lands. And I was just looking at the recommendation of a friend at my astrocartography, and I was not surprised, though, with a bit of a sigh of, oh, well, what am I meant to do about that? It's like all of my lines, my power lines flowing through the northern lands, through Canada and the far north, through Greenland, you know, huge sort of arcs of my soul's energy. Every time I fly over Greenland on my way to the Yellowknife from the UK, my soul sings as I go over those lands. I feel absolutely aligned. And sure enough, when I looked at the astrocartography, it all loops over there. And so too over Iceland, and then this huge confluence over Lapland, fascinatingly, which is where I met my partner, my twin soul flame, and all of that converges there, my Venus lines, and where I came into remembrance and activation in 2017 of my own avatar soul star presence for the dawn, as well as meeting my twin soul and flame there at the same time. And so it was amazing. I couldn't believe it. I was looking in bed this morning first thing at this chart that just exactly mirrored these patterns. So the north is a huge part of my own soul record, and nomad lifetimes as one of the people of the deer, one of the people of the reindeer, walking and traveling those lands. So when I go into those lands, I enter a very easy and deep alignment with what I hold. I'm able to feel and think very clearly. When I'm here, it's very different. And when I looked at my astrocartography, sure enough, this is right here. It's kind of Chiron and Uranus. So I'm wedged between those lines. It's where I have massive transformational healing insight and accelerated growth into who I am through those deep learnings. And sure enough, that's very much what occurs for me in these lands. So when I come back here, it is with a sense of trepidation to some extent, and also of sorrow to leave behind what is a very easy and deep multi-dimensional connection for me, running through aeons of lifetimes upon the earth. I know the flowers, I know the trees, I know the animals, I know the rocks and the people. I just feel I'm at home. I know who I am, and I know where I am, and I can feel the archways, the dimensional connection through worlds. And that is the story of Golden Wheel that I'm writing at present, my second book, following the silver wheel, on its way. But yeah, to come back here, I do remember when I was carried, when I was in Lapland, I also received the memory of when my soul first chose to transit as a medicine woman of those people. And I was a dreamer, a seer of the future. So I saw the future timeline, and I knew that I would have a timeline available where I could choose to be taken in marriage and given to a wealthy family of these islands, but that I would be wedded into patriarchal structures, and that I would not be able to express my spiritual power and abilities through the societal structure that I was entering into. And then I would go through a sequence of lifetimes where that would not be expressed on that level, right through to a lifetime my last one here, where actually I was a suffragette and one of the ones who activated that liberation of the societal power and the cultural, political, societal power of women to express our spiritual power in a way that is meaningful through those aspects of the collective and human society. And so very, very interesting. And all of that has been a very active stream of remembrance. And so these lands for me are very linked into a time when I was taken, and I remember being taken by boat, taken from my lands. And again, that it was a conscious soul choice. I saw that on the greater timeline was the most accelerated way for the continuum of this consciousness to be woven, for the elven lineage of light I carried from the great timeline of eras and aeons before, and that I star walked in remembrance through lands, lifetimes, through Siberia, through Lapland, through those far northern lands, also on the North American continent, following Lemuria and following prior ages, that I would then carry that remembrance interwoven with the lineages here of this land, especially weaving in with the genetic and bloodlines of the She, of the Druid lines here, and of the song of these lands, and the power to carry through language this great stream of remembrance of all that we are, and of the elven light also through dimensions and worlds. And for that to be activated in this lifetime, and for the dawn, as so many of us now, for the dawn, for this great renaissance and return. And so, yeah, so much held in all of that. But when I come back here, it is to lands, if you like, that in some ways are not my own. And yet, as my teacher, Nancy Dancing Light, Nancy Sherwood, who is also lives in Canada and Nova Scotia, such a beautiful, beautiful wisdom bearer, ancient soul, just beyond. And she spoke to me many years ago, and as when one who is there, the soul agreement is to transfer deep knowing one to another, when she spoke it to me, it just lodged as deepest wisdom. She said, you belong to the whole earth. And when I come back here, and this is what I meant at the beginning, when I say that for so many of us, we may be in places or in situations that we don't entirely recognize, where we don't feel full belonging, but that we belong to the whole earth. And while, yes, there may and will be movement from the place where you feel you don't belong, or the situation, without a doubt, there is this belonging to the whole earth, and to allow ourselves to complete what we need to complete where we are, but from a place of wholeness, to be able to enjoy it, not to feel like we're in purgatory or in limbo or just waiting, because, oh my gosh, how long can you wait somewhere, right? It's like, who wants to be waiting in paralysis or hiatus before finally it all gets going? That's just not interesting, and it gets painful if it goes on too long. So yeah, as I come back home, this probably is like a day in the life number 3 this counts as. It's just partly why I'm recording from my bedroom. For those watching on YouTube, I just wanted to share the space because, and I've shared this several times within Aurora and with my writing, Starlight writers' journeys, because it's one of the big challenges we face. What do you do when you've been on a great trip, you've been initiated, awoken into a whole other layer of soul star consciousness, avatar consciousness, you know who you are, you come home and you just don't recognize your world, or you're in a place, a situation that you don't recognize? Well, for a start, to realize we're looking at energy. We're not really looking at matter. We're looking at energy, and that is liquid. It can be reformed, it can be restructured, it can transmute and change and reconfigure around us according to the center we are holding within, according to that 0 point in dreaming we hold within. So ever since I got back, and I wanted to get straight back to the pod and straight back to my work, but actually I needed several days with extreme jet lag, partly, so I've had bizarre hours, but to reconfigure my world so that I can actually be here in coherence. And I've done it over and over again with this space in the 7 years I've been here, because it's been a continuous challenge to live here, actually. And yet it's where I am meant to be for now, without a doubt. So, what I do is I allow for a start the configuration of my dreaming and my energy within myself, settle into avatar presence within my golden temple, multi-dimensional temple. I dream with the heart of the earth and with my home world where I belong beyond, aligning through the sun with the great central sun, my home world and the core of the earth, blossoming the golden temple here, within the heart of which I sit in avatar presence. And then I allow myself to move spontaneously to where I'm guided to in my physical home and reality. So I have hoovered and gardened and been washing clothes, fixing, mending clothes. You can see things hanging behind me. I absolutely love my clothes. And so taking care of them, hand washing the things that need hand washing, and just aligning, dusting, moving crystals. Yesterday I went to the supermarket and I was buying flowers and found this beautiful new potted plant for my temple, moving just with the pure energy of the one who I truly am, with simple, it sounds like a lot, but I'm actually working on a minimalistic principle here. I don't want to invest endless energy into this. It's a reconfiguration so that this reality is coherent with that which I am, allowing it to build into a sphere of coherence until here I am and I can share once more from this space. So some of the beauty I find of being here, and you'll see it in the sort of cascading kind of pink things around me and bits and bobs. One of the things I find particular to being in the UK and being in Avalon especially is the creative energy. The song here is so rich. The creative energy is so rich. You see it as soon as you land. People are more self-expressive. There is more self-expression, which is so part of the core of what my work calls to and sings to. Part of my dream for the dawn is that all of us become so sovereign and self-expressive that we dare to show up exactly as who we are, as that which we long to create through presence. And I love that here, that there is so much of that self-expression, and that these islands always connected with music, with writers, with the artistry of language, the song of these lands, and the way it pours through us as artists, as creatives, as musicians, as those fountains of rich and melodious and beautiful flowing creation that is so powerful here, and especially in Avalon, that is a multi-dimensional fountain of sacred creation and utterly liquid. And I found it as such, like living in water. And it's been amazing for a time when literally for me, as I now know between my Chiron line and my Uranus line, to continuously transfigure, to keep in movement, to learn this liquid starlight becoming, and to transition and melt and dissolve those old karmic patterns and woundings of timelines of separation, and to be liquid through that, for that transition and that shifting. And yet where it carries to me is that there is a crystalline configuration of my own energy. I'm not just infinitely experimenting, infinitely metamorphosing. Well, yes, actually, indeed, I am, and we are, and yet there is an intelligence, there is a sequencing, there is that which we hold for all the worlds and for the dawn. And so that nomad soul, finally to come to this, of our own metamorphosis, of our own migration of expression. And you know how at school, when, well, maybe you don't, this was my school experience, everyone pretty quickly found their place, their archetypal place that they were meant to hold. And you weren't meant to change once you were that, you were this type. You were one of the academics, or one of the square ones, or one of the crazy ones, or you were a hippie, or you were a popular one, or you were whatever it was, all of these different roles. But one way or the other, you were pretty much meant to stay in your bracket. And that can be a human tendency as well, to feel that we have to stay loyal to the square, that we've come to fill, even if it's a really alternative one. But that at this time of the dawn, the nomad soul is awoken for us to migrate through archetypes, for us to migrate through identity, for us to be in that beautiful reindeer footstep after reindeer footstep, hoof print, in migration, in movement, following the impulses of our migrational soul as we find our way back to that which we would love to express for the dawn. And so that nomad soul, also embracing, if your life does still feel, or feels even especially now as mine does, very much in transition, very much in migration, in movement at some level or other, very nomadic, that within that nomadic state, within that movement and metamorphosis, as I spoke at the beginning, to know that doesn't lead us into a seat of our pants kind of state of being, enervated, on fire like those forests, that actually within our nomad soul, within our migration, within our unknowing, our uncertainties, the metamorphoses, the changes, the deaths, the endings, alterations and circumstances, relationships, lands, work, abundance, whatever flows for you are in migration, are changing, that the state of this migration, the nomad soul it awakens within us, is super chilled out and peaceful and cool and able to be very supple and true and peaceful within that state of being. And that's the true essence of our nomad soul. And if you look, I mean, anthropologists and sociologists and all the rest have studied this. If you look at nomad culture, it's not characterized by anxiety and insecurity, quite the opposite. And our societal mythos has made us afraid of that nomadic essence of the state of impermanence and change. Yet deeper within our being, that's actually our home. The whole earth is our home, and we are able to migrate in ways even beyond the earth that we are standing on. We are able to migrate in the sense of connecting more widely or deeply or differently to different communities of people. In the nomad way of life, it's said that we actually, in the nomadic way of life, you might meet thousands of people in a year as tribes would come together in confluence in various places on the land, continuously meeting new and different people, intermarrying, that while people are living in smaller groups, that your actual social interaction and meaningful communication with those outside of your group may have been even greater than it is for us in the modern world. And so that nomad soul, able to expand into a deeper and a greater belonging also of kinship with one another. So yeah, I feel as I speak, there are ways I could expand infinitely into the meaning of the nomad soul. And I was super inspired by a most beautiful book I read that was sitting in the house. I was house sitting, called Humankind. So some of this stuff I'm speaking on the sociological side is from this beautiful, it had me in tears. I was crying many times over as I read. It was so much that I've felt and studied spiritually, but relayed through someone who is thinking through philosophical and intellectual, and anthropological, archaeological, and political, societal lenses. So beautiful, called Humankind by, is it Rutger Berger? I wish I could say his name right. Humankind. I think it's been a huge bestseller. You may have seen it already, but unutterably beautiful. Just adored it. Themes in there I could really elaborate on. Okay, there's one just before I finish. Fascinating in this book. He said, looking at empathy, which might look like one of our most elevated characteristics as human beings, and it's very talked about at the moment, looking at the superpower of our empathy rather than as a drawback, and potentially that those who are empathic have a heightened ability to introduce much more evolved and conscious ways of being with one another because of the level of awareness it facilitates towards the other. But he pointed also to the danger of empathy because of empathy overload, that when we're very sentient and sensitive, it also gives us just as deep a need to shut down at some point, or even to limit the sphere of our interaction because we can only bear to carry that empathic intensity depth of connection for a certain number of people, and better to base ourselves in our compassion rather than our empathy, and to be aware that if we want to deepen into interconnectivity, into our nomadic soul of interconnection, we'd be better to be founded in our compassion instead, in our love, in our care, but from a place that is deeply centered within our own soul star and avatar experience. And that is so true to my own experience, as more and more I'm holding more and more facilitating bigger circles of people, as I'm more and more deeply mentoring others. And I've always had, when I started, that empathic ability. I can mirror through deep empathic awareness the soul structures and flows of energy within the other. But more and more I've been trained, especially through the last 2 years, to do it not through my empathic capacity, but through compassion instead, through my own avatar presence and soul star love, almost not to do what I can do, which is I can literally in my body become immediately and deeply aware of what the other is holding through all of the layers of their being, beyond and within, but to stay embodied within my own soul star golden avatar presence, that elven and reindeer woman presence, that I stay in that energy, and instead I am meeting through the compassionate flows of my being, that other in their own immortal starlight, and from there assisting and perceiving. And it's been something I've experimented with over the last couple of years to really turn around and hone and develop that, because what it means is I don't get exhausted by my work. I don't get run down by it. I don't come away then thinking endlessly about the people I'm working with for the next 2 days until my energy field finally recovers and clears, because that limits my ability for connection. I'm so overwhelmed by that I need to close away and be really, really alone. So instead, this other way, not empathy, but compassion, means that I can sustain a much deeper field of interconnection. It makes it possible to make a podcast, because I'm not instead needing to recover all morning from holding a circle. And huge, beautiful changes that enable me to be much more in that nomadic soul of greater interconnection. Of course, I'm ever evolving this and as I speak, I've spoken a couple of things from my daily life recently. I say, and it's still something I'm working with. And even as I said, I think, maybe I need to stop saying that now. Maybe that time is done. We are in a massive transitional point, and I think some things we've had to work with, we won't have to anymore. So the Nomad Soul, here it is, pod 36, running a few days behind the usual time, and I think you know why now. I've been migrating this physical reality, allowing its lighted structures to alter and to mirror, and it is once more again now my golden teepee, that kota, the tent that shines around me. I am that nomad soul. I belong to the whole earth, and right now here I am in Avalon, sharing the golden elven heart, and I belong wherever I am. Aho, and so it is. So much love, and I will see you quite soon, because I'm recording the next one very presently. Loads of love. Take care. Bye for now.